For those who maybe are new to this channel or this series and haven't been following along on my entire Olympia Odyssey, this is my Olympia Cremina. It's a 1977 model, and it's been out of commission for an undetermined amount of time. And now it is finally ready to get back on the counter and pull some shots of espresso. But before we do that, before we get into my first impressions on this vintage Swiss classic, I first want to tie a bit of a bow, give some closure on the rebuild story. I've, of course, documented the entire process from start to finish here on my YouTube channel, and unfortunately, in the last episode, the essentially what should have been a triumphant rebuild did end on a bit of a cliffhanger, though that really wasn't my intention. Unfortunately, when I flipped a switch, the lights went on. That was a good sign. The element inside the boiler ticked into life and started heating the water, but as it pressurized, I started noticing leaks. And when I say leaks, I don't mean 2 or even 10. There was around 40 pinhole leaks on the bottom 3 inches of the boiler, which was likely due to someone leaving water in there for just way too long or putting corrosive water in there. I don't know what the situation is exactly, but it is now my problem. My sense of jubilation and self-accomplishment quickly faded into despair and frustration, since getting on one of these machines with the right boiler style, which is from like 67 to like 84, would be very hard to do, or just very expensive. When I looked online, they were about $2,000 on average. And, in that case, there's no guarantee that they won't be leaked or covered in asbestos or have other issues I have to contend with already. So I figured, let's just see what we can do with this machine, see if we can get it fixed. So I attempted the self-fix from the factory, according to folks at Orphan Espresso, lock seal, which is a thread sealant, essentially, that's potable water safe, and the certain types of it is, and is supposed to be able to work on pinholes on this machine. Didn't really work that well. And that sort of left me with only one option, which I think is probably the better option in the long run anyway, and that was finding someone who was willing to solder it. A lot of people seemed pretty concerned about getting into a vintage espresso machine. The prices were pretty crazy, and more or less felt like the high prices was due to them not really wanting to take on that liability. So finally, I found someone who was willing to work on it, a gentleman named Fidel, in his shop. And so it ended up being a kind of a back and forth chase the leak sort of process, where he would solder on something, I'd bring it home, test it, point out more leaks, and we'd sort of chase the leaks around until we finally got all of them. And now, the boiler does look more like the elephant foot from Chernobyl, but it holds water, and it holds pressure, and it holds my hopes and my dreams. So if there is just one lesson to be learned today from the series of videos, or even just this video alone, it's that water quality is massively important beyond just what goes in the cup. It's important to just the lifespan of your machine. And that's why I always use today's sponsor, Third Wave Water. When it comes to brewing the best coffee, quality ingredients matter. And purely by the numbers, water makes up to 98% of what's in your cup. And as we've learned today, it's absolutely vital to the long-term reliability of your equipment. So after months of testing and trials, I've landed on Third Wave Water formulas for all of my coffee preparation. Not only is it designed to not produce scale or cause corrosion, but there's an option for every palate. Third Wave Water offers a wide variety of mineral blends specifically designed to get the most out of your favorite roast level or brew type. So take control of arguably one of the most important factors in brewing quality coffee today, and head over to thirdwavewater.com/Sprometheus or use code Sprometheus at checkout to snag 10% off your first purchase. Thanks to Third Wave Water for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back into it. Okay, so now that all the wrenching and tooling and painting and prepping and assembling and all that stuff is done, let's get into the fun stuff. Let's talk first impressions of this Swiss classic. When it comes to the look, I do really love that. I love the boxy, classic simplicity of the whole thing. Of course, it's no longer the vintage orange, but I did want to go with something a bit more modern and clean, and of course went with the wood accents as well, which I think look fantastic over the original black plastic. And the original handles and stuff definitely weren't taken care of that well, which is, I guess, unsurprising. So the new stuff was shinier, but it still, in the end, was plastic. But regardless, the materials that were used on this machine, and having taken it apart and put it back together a total of 10 plus times, I will say that a lot of it lived pretty well over the course of 50 years. That's basically all there is to say about the exterior. It's classic, it's clean, it's simple, it's boxy, and I kind of love it. But from there, I think let's talk about the usability and performance, because this machine has been touted by people of all levels, all skill levels, all, influence levels as one of the best. And I was really curious to kind of get into using it to kind of see where those thoughts and opinions came from. For one, I do love its fast heat up. I can't speak for the original element's performance, but with this new element, it warms up fast in about 10 minutes or so. And with a couple of circulations of water through the group, it's ready to brew in about a third of the time as most powered single boilers, and a sixth of the time as my big boy Pro 800. But now that we're up to speed, or essentially up to temp, let's start talking about the important stuff, the fun stuff, brewing and steaming. So when it comes to the machine's settings, all you can really do is set the boiler's pressure. So I did set the machine to the factory recommended between 7 to 8 bars using a top cap gauge and purging the false pressure that builds up early on. And one of the upgrades I also did was buy the new vacuum valve cap, which replaces the gauge cap and the original cap, which also gives you the ability to not have to purge any false pressure as it builds pressure inside the chamber. So that's a nice upgrade and worthwhile. I was a little skeptical in terms of how much power would be behind the steam wand with such a low setting, but I do think it actually is pretty good, especially once you switch to a single hole tip from the dual hole tip that comes originally. Though I think I will need some time to really get used to and dial in the texture on this machine, the texture that I want, but I do think it's possible. And finally, let's get into the main event, the espresso. At the moment, 49mm portafilters appear to be having a bit of a resurgence of popularity, though still not nearly as popular as the modern and ubiquitous 58mm, but my experience with smaller diameter options has been positive, and it is more forgiving in terms of its dial-in, since its pucks are thicker, meaning you can grind a bit coarser and oftentimes produce more body in balance. And of course, this overall description is absolutely transferable over to the Cremina. Having only pulled a grand total of maybe 15 shots on it thus far, I can say that they've been generally very good in terms of taste and texture, though the Crema tends to be a little thinner than what I'm used to, but likely that's because my spring lever runs on a much higher pressure, and on the Cremina, I've been pulling lower pressure shots, generally between 4 to 7 bars. And much like my spring lever machine, the Cremina pulls relatively short shots, which honestly for me isn't a problem. That's generally what I prefer. Though, like the spring lever, you can do a Fellini method, which is essentially a double press on the lever. Though I do tend to find that process of making a second pass through the puck, the shot ends up being less appealing and tends to bring out some bitterness and astringency. But regardless, the shots so far have been good, but definitely interested to delve a bit deeper into this machine with different roasts and ratios to see how it holds up and see where its flaws may be hiding. But on that note, I think it's time I start wrapping this one up, and as always, pass the conversation on to you. So what are your thoughts on the Olympia Cremina? I know there is a huge fan base out there, but there has to be somebody who maybe sits on the other side of the fence. And if you're an owner of the machine, whether it be a vintage or a new version, and have tips on making better shots or steaming better milk, I'd love to hear them. So drop your answers to those questions and any others you may have in the comment section down below. And as always, I'll see y'all in the next video. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that little bell button for notifications when new videos drop. Check out my Instagram at Sprometheus for more coffee content. Help support the channel by considering becoming a member for exclusive access. And as always, stay caffeinated. Pony Boy